The Last Word with Lawrence O'Donnell starts right now. Hey, Lawrence.
Hey, Jen. We're going to turn our attention, at least for tonight, to campaign in a place other than Maine. We have Amy Acton joining us, running for governor in Ohio, where she's basically running in a tie at this point, 47-47, a straight tie against Vivek Ramaswamy in Ohio. And so the Democrats have a higher hope on that governor's race in Ohio than they have in some time.
She is definitely one to watch. I have a lot of family in Ohio. My husband grew up there, and people are really excited about her. And it's a race where people should be paying attention, because she very well could be the next governor of Ohio, and that is going to matter hugely, not just for next year, but for 2028, as we well know.
Well, our audience is going to get to meet her tonight.
Great.
Thanks, Jen.
Thanks, Lawrence.
Thanks. Well, the breaking news of the night at this hour is that the New York Times is following up on earlier reporting from MS Now. And the New York Times is now reporting that the plane Donald Trump took as a gift from a Middle Eastern dictator does not have the same defensive capacities as Air Force One. The Times reports, in an echo of MS Now's earlier reporting, the new Air Force One, which President Trump flew on earlier this week to Turkey, lacks the same defensive countermeasures that were security features of the old model, including its advanced anti-missile capabilities, according to multiple officials who have been briefed on how the jet was retrofitted. Experts say the absence of those capabilities on the Boeing 747 aircraft, which was donated by Qatar, creates potential risk in using the jet abroad, a dynamic underscored by the abrupt decision on Wednesday for Mr. Trump to leave Turkey on the old Air Force One. At the urging of the Secret Service, Mr. Trump pushed for the new plane to be put into use as quickly as possible and frequently complained that the old presidential aircraft was not impressive enough to take on international trips. It was, of course, and remains the most impressive plane in the world. And it was that impressive so-called old presidential aircraft that had to come to Donald Trump's rescue to fly him out of Turkey because his vanity plane was incapable of doing the job safely. And on the 132nd day of his war, Donald Trump returned from the NATO summit in Turkey, proclaiming himself a peacemaker to reporters gathered on the plane.
Think of the wars they said, hey, the wars that were going on for 30, even if you look, in the Congo versus Rwanda. They said after 14 years and about 15 million people had their heads chopped off. They settled that one. They settled 8 wars. And when she won the Nobel Prize for Peace, she said, I can't believe I won it. The only one that should win it is Trump. Actually, they probably will do the wrong thing. It's very sad with Norway, but I would say I should have won that award more than anybody that ever received the Nobel Peace Prize. Because nobody settled wars. I settled 8 of them. Because I'm a certain type of personality, I was able to settle.
He does have a certain type of personality. He's right about that. It is the subject of the book, The Dangerous Case of Donald Trump. 27 psychiatrists and mental health experts assess a president, published in 2017, which in its latest edition is now titled The Much More Dangerous Case of Donald Trump. 50 psychiatrists and mental health experts warn anew. The mental health experts, who have not personally examined Donald Trump up close, but whose opinions appear in those books, generally agree on a diagnosis of extreme narcissism with an assortment of other pathologies, some of which explain his general inability to tell the truth about anything, including wars that he claims to have settled. We have featured some of the psychiatrists who have contributed to those books on this program, including Dr. Lance Dodas, a former professor of psychiatry at Harvard Medical School, and none of them indicated that Donald Trump's personality could, in any way, help him settle wars. Negotiating a peace agreement with another country would, of course, require, at a minimum, a knowledge of the history of that country, and Donald Trump has repeatedly demonstrated he does not know the history of any country, including his own. It would also, of course, require something Donald Trump does not have: patience, along with dedication, along with attention. He has none of those things, as anyone can tell without being a psychiatrist. While Donald Trump was proclaiming himself to be a great peacemaker to the reporters on his plane, the war he started was still raging in Iran, being no closer to settlement than it was on the first day of Donald Trump's war. The New York Times reports, quote, the U.S. military said overnight that it had struck more than 170 targets in Iran during the previous 48 hours, a significant uptick. And Jordan, which hosts some U.S. military forces but had not been a focus of Tehran's ire in recent flare-ups, said it had intercepted Iranian missiles in its airspace. Iran also said it had fired at U.S. targets in the Gulf nations of Qatar, Kuwait, and Bahrain. Iran threatened on Thursday to expand its attacks to other American military facilities in the region. When asked on the airplane last night, are we returning to full-scale military conflict, Donald Trump said, I don't know. In fact, he said it twice. I don't know, I don't know. You would think that the person who in that same discussion proclaimed himself to be the world's greatest peacemaker, the greatest peacemaker of all time, the greatest peacemaker in the human history, would have some idea of how close to peace he was in his war on its 132nd day. And after saying, I don't know, when asked about the state of his war, Donald Trump, the peacemaker, said this.
We have many ways we can win, but we've already won militarily. They have very little left, and they want to make a deal so badly. They called a little while ago, they want to make a deal so badly.
Donald Trump has said they want to make a deal so badly, those exact words, almost every day of his now 132 days of war. He has been lying every single time he has said that. And at the same time, Iran has demonstrated two things with absolute consistency every day of Donald Trump's war against Iran. One, Iran will not surrender. And two, Iran does not want to make a deal so badly. Iran has shown no eagerness to make a deal at any time, none. And Donald Trump has shown himself to be desperate to make a deal, which is why he agreed to a memo of understanding with Iran, which was full of concessions, immediate concessions to Iran, with no concessions to the United States by Iran. That memo of understanding called for a 60-day ceasefire, a ceasefire that has been violated repeatedly. It seems clear that the one true thing Donald Trump said about his war in Iran today was, I don't know. The question was, remember, are we returning to full-scale military conflict, sir? And he said, I don't know. I don't know. Now, it's one thing for us not to know if the war is returning to full-scale military conflict. It's one thing for no one in Congress to know if the war is returning to full-scale military conflict. But it is a very different thing for the guy who started the war to not know if we are returning to full-scale military conflict, because it is his decision to return or not return to full-scale military conduct. And what he is admitting right there is he just does not know, meaning he does not know what to do. It's his war. He's commander-in-chief, and he has no idea what to do. None. That's what he admitted to. At age 80, in the middle of the night, on an airplane, he no longer has the strength to fake it as fully as such situations require of someone like Donald Trump. And so when asked what he's going to do next in his war, in effect, he said, I don't know. No commander-in-chief of the American military has ever given that answer about the state of a conflict. You can search the transcripts of President Lyndon Johnson and President Nixon's public discussions of the war in Vietnam and the various stages of battle, and you will never once find one of those presidents saying, "I don't know." It turns out there was much the presidents of the United States didn't know about what was going to happen in the Vietnam War, but they were all careful enough in their public commentary to never be forced to publicly admit to the American people, "I don't know." That is Donald Trump's unique contribution to commanders-in-chief public dialogue during warfare. Before he left the NATO summit, Donald Trump had what appeared to be a senior moment. You know, the kind of thing that can happen to any of us when we hallucinate that we're sitting beside Vladimir Putin.
Do you have a question for President Putin, please?
There he is, inviting the audience of reporters to ask a question of the man sitting beside him, the man he gestures to, President Putin. And here is the man who was sitting beside him, who Donald Trump called President Putin. And so once again, we have to imagine what the American news media, what the Republican Party would have been doing for the last day or more if Joe Biden had ever pointed to President Zelensky and called him President Putin. Once Donald Trump realized his mistake about that, he tried to cover for it by again asking the audience of reporters for a question that he should ask President Putin in a planned conversation with Putin later in the day. This is the first time in history that a president of the United States sought public advice from reporters about what to say to a president of Russia or a president of any country in the world in a presumably important phone call. And here is what happened.
Give us a question for Putin.
Why is he attacking Ukraine
Because I'm
cities
speaking
if he
to him
wants
today.
peace?
Yeah, but Putin,
Why is he
Give me a
attacking
good, hard
Ukraine
question.
cities if he wants peace?
when will he end this war?
That's a
the
good question. I don't think I've ever answered that question. I've been asking that
Please do.
question.
And so there's Donald Trump's crime against humanity. Donald Trump's crime against the humanity that he should have been showing to the people of Ukraine every day of Vladimir Putin's war against the people of Ukraine, in which Vladimir Putin has attacked hospitals that have been forced to take pregnant women from their beds in the middle of giving birth and get them out of that hospital. Vladimir Putin, who has killed children in their homes in what is now the fourth year of Vladimir Putin's war against the innocent and peace-loving people of Ukraine. Donald Trump said he has never even dared to ask Vladimir Putin the first question he should have asked him as President of the United States: when are you going to end this war? And he should have said it as a demand. Donald Trump lied to every person in America who made the mistake of voting for him last time by promising each and every one of those voters that he would end Vladimir Putin's war in Ukraine on the first day of his presidency. He was lying every single time he said that. And on this, the 536th day of Donald Trump's presidency, Donald Trump still has never asked Vladimir Putin, when are you going to end this war? Donald Trump has still never demanded that Vladimir Putin end that war today. And we know that because the weary brain of Donald Trump just blurted out that confession of his incompetence, of his inhumane indifference to the suffering in Ukraine, and to his abject and repeated cowardice in the face of Vladimir Putin. I'm going to ask him that question, said Donald Trump, and we can be sure that he was lying when he said that. We can be sure that the coward who has never dared to ask Vladimir Putin that question did not ask Vladimir Putin that question in whatever conversation they may have had. And historians 100 years from now and hundreds of years from now can use that line right there to prove just how much Donald Trump did not do to settle wars, just how much Donald Trump did not care about Vladimir Putin's war in Ukraine, and just how much Donald Trump did not care about trying to save anyone's life in Ukraine. Leading off our coverage tonight is retired Rear Admiral in the U.S. Navy, John Kirby. He is the former White House National Security Communications Advisor and Director now of the University of Chicago's Institute of Politics. He is also an MS Now National Security Analyst. And Admiral Kirby, I just want to begin with what we know as of now about Air Force One. MS Now has been kind of leading the reporting on this and about the fact that the plane simply doesn't have anti-missile capabilities and other of the basic defensive capabilities that Air Force Ones have always had. What is your reaction to what we're learning about that and the fact that Air Force had to send in the real Air Force One to rescue Donald Trump and get him out of Turkey?
Well, with due care for me not to talk about systems that may or may not be classified, I would just say that I was glad to see that the Secret Service made that recommendation, and I was glad to see that the president concurred in that, and they allowed the old Air Force One to finish the trip. I mean, it's obviously really important that our commander-in-chief, whether you voted for him or not, is safe in the sky. So it was a good decision by the Secret Service and a good decision by President Trump to go ahead and accept that recommendation and fly in the old Air Force One. It does speak, though, to the degree of work that still must be done, apparently, to get this new jet into a posture from a security infrastructure perspective, so that it can be flown safely around the world. And obviously that work must still continue. So
Donald Trump, when asked about where we are in this war, basically said, I don't know. He was asked, is this going to escalate? He said, I don't know. What is your assessment, or how would you try to approach making an assessment now of where we are in this war?
My biggest concern right now, Lawrence, is that both sides appear to be misreading the will of the other. President Trump strikes, in fact, with a controlled escalation, started hitting infrastructure targets over the last 24 hours. And the apparent belief that will pressure the Iranians to stop trying to close the Strait of Hormuz or pressure them back to the table. It hasn't worked at all yet, and I don't see any signs that it will. On the other hand, the Iranians keep thinking that they can just wait Donald Trump out and he's not going to go back to all-time war, and so he's up in the ante, and they've got it wrong. They got it wrong because they got hit a little harder over the last 24 than they did to 24 previously. And what that means to me is that the risk of miscalculation and escalation only increase here. Both sides are betting that the other side's going to blink, and each time they make that bet, it gets more dangerous. And right now, the hardliners are the only ones that are cashing in, particularly the hardliners in Iran. They're becoming emboldened now by these additional strikes by Trump, and they are actually increasing the stakes themselves. So I'm very worried about a cycle of escalation and miscalculation that could really lead to a much broader war in the region than what we've seen so far.
You have attended and know how NATO summits are supposed to proceed, how they're supposed to work, what they're supposed to accomplish or hope to accomplish. What is your assessment of this one?
So I think I was obviously disappointed that there was so much complaining about the allies by the president and in the administration in the first few hours of the summit. I can't say I was surprised by it, but I was certainly disappointed by that, since NATO is the most powerful and successful international alliance ever in history. And I think we're stronger when we have allies and partners. That said, if you look at the way it ended, I think everybody, including many European leaders, probably breathed a sigh of relief. There was a communique that the United States signed onto. That was significant. That communique reaffirmed Article 5, the belief in collective defense. An attack on one is an attack on all. The United States signed up to that. That's a good sign. And more critically than anything, Lawrence, it reaffirmed support by NATO for Ukraine. Now, I wish that the United States was doing more to lead in providing direct support to Ukraine, but the fact that that language was in the communique and the United States held firm to that, I think that was a positive sign. So as NATO summits go, this one was much more about spending than it was about strategy. And in the end, I think all the right decisions were made and the right messages were sent when it all concluded.
And then Donald Trump ended it in his public comments by telling reporters that he's never asked Vladimir Putin to end his war in Ukraine, apparently never discussed with Vladimir Putin ending his war in Ukraine.
I wish I could say I was surprised by that, but I wasn't. I think, though, even if he had asked that question or will ask that question, whatever he gets back from Putin is also going to be a lie. Putin's not going to be honest with Donald Trump or the rest of the world about what he's trying to achieve in Ukraine or how he's doing that. You obviously can't trust that man. So I think, again, it's really important for the United States to get back in the game, to lead support to Ukraine. I was glad to see that the president allowed Ukraine to manufacture Patriots. It's going to take some time, but they need those interceptors. It's really important that the United States get back in the game and lead support to Ukraine. That's the best way to end this war in terms that are favorable not only to the Ukrainian population, but to the rest of Europe.
John Kirby, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
You bet.
Coming up, MS Now's Ken Dilanian will join us next with his new reporting on FBI Director Kashyap Patel and his reporting on the lack of safety measures in Donald Trump's new favorite airplane. That's next. Kashyap Patel has a new problem, and that problem is the oldest member of the United States Senate. The Republican chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, which has jurisdiction over the FBI, 92-year-old Chuck Grassley of Iowa, is that problem. MS Now's Ken Dilanian is reporting on a letter that Chairman Grassley sent to FBI Director Patel, saying, quote, demanding that Patel turn over information about his flights on FBI aircraft and about the FBI's purchase of BMW vehicles. Yesterday, the top Democrat on the Senate Judiciary Committee, Senator Dick Durbin, joined the top Democrat on the House Judiciary Committee, which also has jurisdiction over the FBI, Congressman Jamie Raskin, in co-signing a letter demanding that Director Patel provide records showing whether he reimbursed taxpayers for personal travel on FBI planes, as well as accounting of his use of government resources. MS Now was first to report in December that the FBI had purchased a fleet of armored BMW X5s for Patel's use, and that Patel had been taking personal trips aboard the FBI's Gulfstream jet. And according to new reporting by Ken Dilanian, whistleblowers have told Democratic lawmakers that FBI Director Kash Patel has been demanding special perks from Bureau employees during his taxpayer-funded travels throughout the country, including helicopter tours and jet ski excursions. In their letter to the FBI Director, Senator Durbin and Congressman Raskin write, your VIP snorkeling experience in Hawaii was not an isolated incident. You frequently demand special perks on official trips around the globe, such as a taxpayer-funded helicopter tour during your multi-country jaunt across East Asia and other recreational activities like jet skiing. Your jet setting and lack of justification for these trips are out of control. And the new attaché office you established in Wellington, New Zealand, may have been opened in part to justify a sightseeing trip you took there. You demoted personnel in Brussels because they failed to ensure you were adequately entertained. The American people deserve an FBI director focused on keeping us all safe rather than jet setting to check off personal bucket list items. Congress requires a transparent accounting of how you are using Americans' hard-earned tax dollars. In a statement to MS Now, FBI spokesman Ben Williamson said Patel's travel has been fully consistent with executive branch requirements and policies that extend over decades across all administrations. FBI Director Patel has reimbursed all personal travel and expenses strictly following the Office of Management and Budget rules in the exact same manner as all previous FBI directors and is fully compliant. And now Chuck Grassley is telling Kash Patel that he better be able to prove all of that. Joining us now is MS Now Justice and Intelligence reporter Ken Delaney. And Ken, I just want to begin with what we were just talking about on Air Force One, because you did the initial reporting on this about how the new Qatari plane, the gift to Donald Trump, just doesn't have the defensive measures that all Air Force One have had.
Yeah, as soon as we learned that Donald Trump was not flying in that plane from Turkey to the UK, my colleagues Carol Lanigan, Priya Sridhar, and I started making some calls to sources who said, yeah, there's a reason for that. This plane does not have the missile defenses. It doesn't have the communication suite. It doesn't have the things that the real Air Force One has because it was rushed through its retrofitting. You know, it was a gift from the government of Qatar, obviously. And now the New York Times is out quoting on the record the former Secretary of the Air Force who was overseeing this process, saying he's shocked that this plane is even flying overseas because it just isn't ready for prime time in terms of military defense. And this is at a time when Iran would like to take that plane down if it could, and Turkey borders Iran, so that's why they didn't fly Donald Trump.
And the real Air Force One aircraft have kind of a situation room, proxy there on the plane, which this new plane doesn't have, or doesn't have all of the situation. And there was a situation room session going on about Iran, about striking Iran on that flight.
Right. It lacks the flying situation room, the full suite, and also we're told certain missile defense capabilities that it really does need.
So Chuck Grassley joining the Democrats in saying to Kash Patel, show me the receipts. I want to see exactly how you reimburse. They just want to see the records that he's claiming in that statement he has done.
That's right. And, he did this secretly. He didn't make it public, but I found out about it. And he is tweeting tonight, welcoming the Democrats to overseeing the use of taxpayer resources. He asked where they were when Chris Wray was doing this. Well, the answer is Chris Wray flew in the plane because he was required to his vacation home. He wasn't jetting all over the country and the world the way Kash Patel is doing. Democrats really feel that Kash Patel is essentially setting up work trips to take vacations. I mean, we all saw him at the Olympics in Italy, and he went to...
and he claimed that was a work trip.
Exactly, and he did conduct meetings there, hastily arranged meetings overseas, but he was also in the locker room chugging a beer with the men's hockey team. And what the Democrats are hearing from whistleblowers is that he's demanding to be entertained on these trips. And he's making FBI employees jump through hoops to make sure that he is having fun. And, he's going to see his girlfriend perform, I believe this weekend, and she's performing in Chicago. And lo and behold, there is an official FBI trip in Chicago. And so it's come to the point now where Chuck Grassley, who's been a big supporter of Donald Trump, big supporter of Kash Patel, is now asking these questions and demanding these records. And he actually has the power to make Kash Patel turn them over and to maybe have a hearing about it.
Yeah, it's a big difference to have the minority on the committee that has no power. But this is the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee. Right. He is all powerful in relation to Kash Patel.
That's right. And whatever else you think about Chuck Grassley, he has a years-long record of doing oversight on the spending of taxpayer money. He wants people to be honest about how they're spending money. He wants Congress to have a say in how that works. And he looks like he's moving to do that in this case.
There seems to be, you use the phrase whistleblower. This seems to be a government official who really inspires whistleblowers. There's a lot of people working in the FBI, working in the Justice Department, who are witnesses to what he's doing.
That's right. And I, as somebody who's covered the FBI for a long time, I've never had this level of access to people inside and then former officials who are talking to their friends inside. In previous administrations, they had no reason to talk to the press. We're not their friends. This is a conservative organization that, and now they are just traumatized by what's going on, and they want people to know what's going on, and that's why we're finding out about this stuff, Lauren.
Ken Delaney, thank you very much for this reporting on both Air Force One and the FBI director. Really appreciate you joining us. And coming up, the Democratic candidate for governor in Ohio, Dr. Amy Acton, will join us. She's running in a 47-47 tie. She'll be here right after this break. as of tonight, Democrats have a strong chance of winning a Senate seat in Ohio and also winning the governorship in Ohio, the 7th largest state in the union. A New York Times poll shows 54% of Ohio voters disapprove of Donald Trump's job as president. Some polls have shown Democrat Sherrod Brown running ahead of the incumbent Republican senator, while others have that race in a statistical tie. The New York Times poll shows Donald Trump's disapproval rating at 54%. That poll also shows the Democratic candidate for governor, Amy Acton, in a 47-47 tie with the Republican candidate for governor, Vivek Ramaswamy, whose first political campaign was a losing effort, running against Donald Trump for the Republican presidential nomination in 2024. Vivek Ramaswamy surely always knew that he didn't have a chance against Donald Trump and was running just to become famous after already having become rich. And so devotion to the campaign trail was not exactly his thing in his clownish candidacy. That campaign to get famous was not good training for how to actually run a campaign to win. And so apparently, Vivek Ramaswamy has no idea how important 4th of July weekend is for campaigning in America for candidates who are actually trying to win. The Cincinnati Enquirer wrote yesterday, Vivek Ramaswamy spent the 4th of July making public appearances in Lancaster and Upper Arlington before boarding a private jet bound for Paris, France. The irony is difficult to ignore. The Republican nominee for governor of Ohio could not stomach remaining on American soil for the entirety of our nation's birthday celebration before the allure of Paris called his name. Democratic nominee for governor Amy Acton's campaign put out this video of what she was doing on the 4th of July instead of boarding a private plane to Paris.
So I'm a first-time voter, and I'm really happy to vote for you.
Oh, thank you. What's your name?
Sophie.
Sophie, thank you. Hi, everybody. Before.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you so much.
Best of luck to you.
Thank you.
Hey, hi. How you doing? Guys, all right?
I hope you'll be we're going to do it, guys. What a beautiful home.
Delicious.
Thank you. Thank you.
When you was in office with DeWine,
Yeah.
I thought a lot of you.
Everything. Thank you. We got it.
Thank you for everything.
Thank you. Hi, sweetie. Happy birthday, America.
Joining us now is the Democratic nominee for governor in Ohio, Dr. Amy Acton. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. And, you know, it shouldn't be funny to hear a candidate on a video on the 4th of July saying, Happy birthday, America. But when your opponent is in the sky in his private jet flying to Paris, when did you find out that your opponent had flown off to Paris on the 4th of July?
You know, first of all, Lawrence, it's wonderful to be here with you. And I'm an Ohio girl through and through. And I spent my 250th in places like Marietta, Ohio, the oldest settlement and the oldest city in our state, Dayton and Athens, Ohio. And you really can't put words to the fact that my opponent literally got on his corporate jet and headed to Paris. Not Paris, Ohio, because there is a Paris, Ohio, but Paris, France. It was an honor to spend this, and I remember 200 years, so this was special for me.
What do you see as the top issue in this campaign?
Yeah. Well, you know, first of all, I'm a doctor. I'm not a politician. This is my first elected office, but I'm a lifelong public servant. And I've been traveling the state of Ohio now for 2.5 years, going places, quite frankly, Dems have not been in a while, listening deeply to the people of Ohio. We see record crowds showing up. It does not know party. It never has. And 95% of what everyone is talking about, no one would disagree on. It absolutely is the cost of everyday life. Housing is too expensive. Rent, no one can afford. Our electric bills are going up. Mine went up $140 last summer. Childcare is unaffordable. Healthcare costs. We have hospitals closing everywhere. It truly is a longing at this point for public servants again who actually solve problems instead of making them.
You served as the director of the Ohio Department of Health.
Yes.
How does that inform your approach to public service and to the governorship?
Well, first of all, it was an honor to serve in a moment like that. I did serve along Governor Mike DeWine, a Republican governor. In Ohio, we saved a lot of lives. We flattened that curve. We actually opened earlier and got back to life sooner because we took swift and decisive action. He is not the first governor. I'm 60 years old. I've worked with 5 different governors. I've spent my entire life as a physician, particularly in preventive medicine, which is trying to treat the whole community or state as your patient, the social and environmental and economic determinants. And I trained to do this work when Bob Taft was governor of Ohio. So it goes back a while for me. I've spent my life working with whoever wants to solve things. And I can't say this enough. Ohioans are longing for change. And they're longing for the hate and the chaos and the vitriol to end. They're exhausted by it. You know Sherrod Brown very well. His people tell me they've never seen anything like this. We never, ever in 2.5 years have been in a room, Lawrence, where someone doesn't cry. It happened again tonight. I was with a couple hundred people in a barn near Buckeye Lake in Ohio, and I watched the tears well up. People are tired of living this way. They all feel that they want to see change. And I can tell you, Ohio is absolutely in play. And it's a people movement. I'm up against a self-funding billionaire who is not just out of touch. He is out for himself. But we are outraising him the last 2 quarters. We've been tied our head in every poll. And it is a people-powered movement. We outraised a self-funding billionaire with an average gift of $24. We had more votes for governor in the primary than any candidate on either side of the aisle in Ohio's history. We are going to tell Mr. Ramaswamy in no uncertain terms in November that you can't buy this state, you can't buy Ohio, and you can't buy us. And I need everyone's help. ActingForGovernor.com, please help join this fight. This is about everything. You remember the adage, as goes Ohio, so goes the nation, and I'm honored to be a part of this fight.
Ohio Democratic nominee for governor, Dr. Amy Acton, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you. And coming up, gas prices went up overnight as Donald Trump's war flared up again. But some mysterious supporter of Donald Trump, who the White House refuses to name, has found a way to slightly and temporarily reduce gas prices in 25 gas stations. That's 25 gas stations in a country with 150,000 gas stations. That's next. Donald Trump's approval ratings continue to hit record lows. 60% of Americans disapprove of Donald Trump's handling of the economy, while only 33% approve, his lowest approval rating ever in a Marist poll. After Donald Trump said the U.S.-Iran ceasefire was over, that was his word, his phrase was, it's over, gas prices immediately rose 5 cents overnight to $3.84, 86 cents higher per gallon than it was before Donald Trump's war on Iran began. According to the recent Marist poll, 34% of Americans say current gas prices are a major strain on their household budget. 44% say it's a minor strain, and just 22% say it's no strain at all. On social media, Donald Trump announced that gas prices are going down because someone, possibly a mysterious unnamed billionaire Trump supporter, has decided to create what the White House is calling the Freedom Fuel Network. Donald Trump announced the Freedom Fuel Network will be lowering gas prices at 25 Freedom Fuel stations across the greater Philadelphia area. This retailer is taking the lead, and others should follow. No others have followed, and the White House refused to say who the retailer is who is willing to lose money on the sale of gasoline for Donald Trump. There are 160,000 gas stations in America, and some secret friend of Donald Trump's is temporarily lowering slightly prices at 25 gas stations, all of them in the same area around Philadelphia. Joining us now is Congressman Brendan Boyle of Pennsylvania. He's the top Democrat on the House Budget Committee, and he's a member of the powerful House Ways and Means Committee. Congressman Boyle, first of all, have you found that $3.47 gas in the Philadelphia area?
Well, good to be with you as always, Lawrence. And I understand that one of these stations is apparently a few blocks away from where I live. So I appreciate Donald Trump for the first time in the 6 years he's been president doing something nice for me personally. But I would remind people that had he just not started his absurd war of choice in Iran, we would go back to paying $2.98 a gallon, which was the national average just 4.5 months ago. So $3.47 is better when you're used to paying over $4. But of course, it was under $3 a gallon before his stupid war that he has now lost repeatedly.
And there's Donald Trump tonight saying, I don't know. He doesn't even know where we are in this war. He doesn't know what's going to happen next. So no one knows what's going to happen to gas prices next and all the other prices that then get pegged to fuel costs.
Well, you know, I believe that he has successfully ended this war 17 times on my count, according to his social media. But if we just take a step back for a second and think of where we've been over the last just under 2 years, inflation was coming down every single month during 2024. We were almost back to 2%. And Donald Trump has done two major things since then. First, the Trump tariff taxes, which have increased costs for the American consumers and increased cost writ large for this nation. And then on top of that, this disastrous war in Iran, which of course has raised fuel prices as well as other costs. Combined, inflation is again through the roof, and it is specifically because this time, not because of coming out of a pandemic, it is specifically because of the policies of Donald J. Trump.
As we go forward with the affordability issue in what is now the congressional campaigns for this year, do you see anything changing the dynamics of that issue as we move toward November?
If anything, the issue seems to be even more palpable today because things are getting worse and not better. You know, it's remarkable when you think about that Donald Trump has the trifecta at this moment. He could actually pass something literally this upcoming week when we return to session that would bring down costs for the American people. Instead, House Republicans are so dysfunctional that for 2 consecutive weeks, Mike Johnson has had to cancel House session because he literally can't get a basic rule, essentially a motion to proceed to pass. This is something that was always an afterthought for most of the last several decades, indeed for most of congressional history. So unfortunately, things I believe will get a lot worse on this issue before they get better.
Congressman Brendan Boyle, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
We'll be right back. That is tonight's last word.